Life often presents us with choices that can define our paths. After a tumultuous chapter filled with heartbreak and betrayal, I found myself at a crossroads. Instead of allowing anger and resentment to dictate my future, I decided to embrace the philosophy that the best revenge is a life well lived. As I shifted my focus toward healing and rebuilding the relationships that truly mattered, I discovered a profound sense of joy and fulfillment. Surrounded by the love of my family, I was ready to celebrate new beginnings and reclaim the happiness that once felt so distant. I'm Tom Williams, and my life turned upside down in a way I never imagined possible. The last thing I heard from my daughter Carly echoed in my mind, "Really, Dad? Mom's right. You really are an ass." Those words came just before I hung up the phone, leaving me feeling hollow and bewildered. Over the next few days, Carly tried to reach out with texts, but I deleted them without reading. A couple of voice messages came through, but the moment I heard her voice echoing my ex-wife Kella's sentiments, I couldn't bear to listen any longer. Kella had made her choice 10 years ago, and now it felt like she was using our daughter as a puppet to express her resentment. I would have preferred if she had taken the olive branch she offered and shoved it where the sun doesn't shine. We had been married for about 17 years, or at least that's how long I thought our life together was perfect. We had 2 wonderful kids, a smart and athletic 14-year-old son named Josh and a sweet 16-year-old daughter, Carly. Everything seemed perfect. Kella was my partner, and I loved her deeply. I thought she loved me too, but I guess I was wrong. Our kids were bright and well-behaved, and we were a happy family. Carly was a daddy's girl, and she idolized me. From a young age, she had shown a knack for math and science, and when she turned 16, she got her driver's license and started dreaming of becoming an engineer like me. She was always at my side in the garage, handing me tools as I tinkered with my beloved old cars. I was a tech enthusiast, particularly passionate about classic GM vehicles, and Carly shared that passion. We spent weekends together at car shows, sharing a love for all things automotive. In addition to our automotive adventures, I was quite handy around the house, and Carly was eager to help me with chores. I taught her the basics of plumbing, electrical work, and even how to paint. While she often turned to her mother for advice on girl-related issues, she came to me for everything else, from homework dilemmas to questions about boys. Our bond was strong, and I felt proud to be her father. On the other hand, Josh was more of a mommy's boy, showing little interest in cars or mechanics. He excelled in English and social studies, often talking about his aspirations of becoming a lawyer. Lately, though, he seemed to be drifting away from me, becoming closer to Kella, which added to my discomfort. Kella had started acting strangely, almost distant. Nothing overt, just a subtle change in her demeanor that left me feeling uneasy. I would ask her if everything was all right, but she would brush it off with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I sensed something was off, but I couldn't pinpoint it. One Friday evening, I returned home around my usual time of 6 p.m., only to find the house unusually quiet. The aroma of dinner was absent, and there was no greeting from Carly, which was odd. She always acknowledged my arrival. I assumed the kids were out with friends, so I shrugged it off and headed upstairs to change into more comfortable clothes. As I walked into the bedroom, I saw something that made my heart drop. Kella had laid out a little black dress, sexy lingerie, stockings, and a pair of towering heels on the bed. That explained the lack of dinner. It seemed we weren't staying in for the evening after all. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. When I walked into the bathroom, Kella was busy applying makeup. "Where are we going tonight?" I asked, attempting to sound casual. "We're not going anywhere," she replied nonchalantly. "Then why are you dressed up like that?" I pressed, feeling more confused by the moment. "I'm going out, Tom," she said matter-of-factly. "Going out? With who? Where are the kids?" Panic surged through me. "The kids are spending the night with friends," she explained, her tone calm. "I have a date tonight. I probably won't be back until tomorrow morning." "What do you mean you have a date, and you're not coming home until morning?" My disbelief turned to anger. "This is insane. You can't be serious." "I am serious. It's just one night. I need to prove to myself that I'm still attractive to other guys. If you really love me, you'll let me have this night." I felt as if the ground had shifted beneath me. "After 17 years of marriage, this is how you repay me?" You want to go out and have some fun while I'm left here to deal with the aftermath? This isn't happening, Kella. Her response was infuriatingly calm. I just need this, Tom. It's just one night. Just one night? I spat back, my heart racing. You think you can waltz out of here and come back like nothing's happened? Look, Tom, it's just for one night. Then it's back to business as usual, she replied. I felt a mix of disbelief and rage. The woman I had loved, the mother of my children, was planning to spend the night with another man. My mind raced, searching for the words to express the turmoil inside me. I can't believe this, I muttered, feeling the weight of betrayal crush down on me. You can't just throw away our marriage for one night of fun. It means everything to me. But in that moment, it became clear. Kella was determined to go through with her plans, and there was nothing I could say to change her mind. I stood there, paralyzed by shock, realizing that our lives were about to take a path I never wanted. What would I tell the kids? How could I explain this fracture in our family? I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and I could see everything I had worked for crumbling beneath me. As the evening wore on, I could feel the tension between us mounting. If you truly loved me, I said, trying to hold my ground, you wouldn't even consider this. I do love you, Sarah replied, her voice steady, but her eyes flickering with uncertainty. But I need this. I'm getting older and I want to feel attractive, especially to younger men. Clarence is about 10 years my junior and he's been flirting with me for the past 6 months. I finally decided to accept his offer. It's just one night of sex, a way to remind myself that I'm still desirable. It's a confidence boost I really need. I felt my heart sink as she spoke. But you're beautiful to me. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You're still the woman I fell in love with. Sarah waved her hand dismissively. I see a few wrinkles and some gray hairs starting to show. I need something to lift my spirits. This isn't about you. It's about me reclaiming a part of myself. I shook my head, my frustration boiling over. Do you remember the vows we exchanged? Those meant something. If you go through with this, you're breaking that commitment. She scoffed at my words. It's just one night. I'll come home afterward and it'll be like nothing happened. Are you serious? You really think I'll believe that? After everything we've built together? If you go through with this, it's over. You'll be out the door, and I'll see a lawyer as soon as possible. Don't be ridiculous, she shot back. There will be no divorce. I'll come back home, and I'll be the loving wife you've always known. If you try to divorce me, I'll fight you tooth and nail. You'll lose the house, most of your assets, and I'll get full custody of the kids. I'll make sure to ruin your dating life, and I'll place all the blame for our family's breakup squarely on your shoulders. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. You say you love me, but how can you do this? How can you even think of being with someone else? I love you, she insisted, her expression hardening. But if you force my hand, I'll fight to keep what I deserve. I just need one night to prove to myself that I'm still attractive and desirable. This won't lead to anything more. What happens when you start thinking this way again in a few years? What if you want to do this again? You think this is just a one-time fling? What about the next time you wonder if you're still appealing to younger men? I promise it won't happen again. Yes, I heard some gossip, and yes, I'm curious. But it's just going to be sex. You have nothing to worry about. He won't take me away from you. It's just a way to get this out of my system. Maybe I'll even learn a few new things to spice up our sex life. I was at my wit's end. If you go through with this, I've already told you the consequences. Call him right now and cancel. We can try marriage counseling and salvage what we have. She waved me off. Counseling? To heal my bruised ego? We can talk about it when I get back tomorrow. As she got ready for her date, I felt the walls closing in around me. I changed into jeans and a t-shirt, feeling powerless. When she came downstairs, dressed in a stunning outfit with a small clutch in hand, my heart sank further. I could see her checking herself out in the mirror by the door, completely unaware of the turmoil she was causing. Suddenly, a car horn blared outside. He's here, she said, glancing back at me with a smirk. I'll see you in the morning. She leaned in to kiss me, but I turned away, recoiling at the thought of her leaving. Don't do this, I pleaded. If you walk out that door, it's over. Think twice about throwing away 17 years of marriage. She frowned at my words. I'm not throwing anything away. I'll be back, and everything will fall back into place. With that, she opened the door and stepped out, leaving me alone with my despair. I felt tears well up as I mourned the impending loss of my marriage and the woman I had dedicated myself to for nearly 2 decades, 17 years of marriage, a year of engagement, and 2 years of exclusive dating. How could she do this to me? We had a seemingly normal life, a fulfilling sex life, and she had never voiced any discontent. I would have gladly given her more if she had asked. We fought about trivial things, as all couples do, but we always resolved our issues together. Half an hour later, still reeling, I got up and headed to work. I had hoped she would return, but that didn't happen. I climbed the stairs to our guest bedroom, which now felt like my temporary refuge. It was a large house with 4 bedrooms, our master, the kids' rooms, and this guest room that had been transformed into my new reality. Moving my belongings took a couple of hours. I had no illusions about what a divorce would mean. Living in a no-fault state meant I was at a significant disadvantage, especially as a husband. Unless Sarah committed a serious crime, the laws favored her, and I knew that. I would be left with little more than a few belongings, while she would retain the house, the kids, and everything we had worked for. As I surveyed the room, I realized I was not just losing my wife. I was on the verge of losing my family, my home, and everything I held dear. The thought filled me with despair, but I knew I had to be prepared for whatever came next. As I settled into my new temporary living situation, I couldn't shake the feeling that Kella had gotten the best of our relationship while I was left with the fallout. After getting my bearings, I headed to the home office and logged into our online banking account. A few years back, I had opened a separate account in my name. Not for any sneaky reasons, but so I could surprise her with gifts. Each time she checked our finances, she'd see my purchases, and I wanted her to have that element of surprise on special occasions. But now, that account would serve a different purpose. I knew she was aware of the account but didn't have access to it. With a calculated move, I transferred exactly half of our joint checking and savings into my personal account. Then, using the remaining funds, I paid off all our credit cards, issuing new ones solely in my name. Yes, I probably should have settled the debts first, but I'd rather deal with whatever the court decided than try to collect from her later. I planned to reroute my direct deposits to my personal account on Monday morning and would call our broker to discuss splitting our investments. Once that was done, I poured myself another glass of Jim Beam on the rocks and retreated to my room, the weight of the night's events heavy on my mind. Sleep eluded me. The absence of Kella next to me turned the bed into a vast, empty space. My thoughts spiraled. What could I have done differently? Should I have physically stopped her from leaving? Confronted that jerk she was seeing? The night dragged on, punctuated by restless dozing. When dawn finally broke, I rose and took a long, steamy shower, hoping to wash away some of the turmoil. After getting dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, I headed downstairs for breakfast. I was enjoying my coffee and skimming through the newspaper when Kella returned home. "Good morning, sweetheart. I'm back, just like I promised," she chirped, trying to brighten the mood. But my anger bubbled just below the surface. I had ignored her all night, and my frustration had only intensified with each passing moment. I realized then that I had done nothing to deserve the disrespect she had shown me. What she did was her choice, and it weighed solely on her conscience. Even if I had managed to stop her that night, she would have simply found another way to betray me. People often say that you can't just stop loving someone. While that might be true, I discovered I could easily transform that love into resentment. The real opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. If there's hate, at least there's still passion, a chance to reignite something. But indifference? That's a dead end. As I contemplated this, Kella called out again, searching the house for me. "Where are you?" she asked, her tone bright and hopeful. I stayed silent, letting her find me in the office. "There you are!" she exclaimed, stepping into the room. "I cleaned myself up before coming over. Now things can go back to normal." I couldn't let her sweet demeanor sway me. When she approached with open arms, ready to hug and kiss me, I recoiled, pushing her away. "Keep your hands off me," I snapped, the words sharper than I intended. "God only knows what those lips have touched." Her eyes widened in shock. I had never spoken to her like that before. "You need to go to a clinic and get tested for STDs, I continued, my voice cold and unwavering. "And I want to see a notarized clean report from you." Her shock morphed into anger, and I hoped this would be the wake-up call she needed. "I see you're still grappling with your bruised ego," she retorted. "I'm going to take a nap. I've had a long night." As she left the room, I couldn't help but smile, anticipating her reaction when she discovered what I had done. "What the hell did you do?" she yelled as she stormed back into my office. "Where are your clothes? Where are all your toiletries?" "Everything's where it should be," I replied calmly, feigning innocence. "No! Your closet is empty. Your drawers are empty. What's going on?" she exclaimed, confusion mixing with disbelief. I simply smirked. "Ah, I see your mistake. You still think of our bedroom as our bedroom. But all of my belongings are exactly where they belong, in my space." As I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, I replied to Kella, "You mean you've decided to move out?" "Yes," she confirmed. "I told you I wouldn't put up with this anymore, so I'm going to live in my new room until I can find an apartment." I contemplated telling her about our finances, but decided against it. I thought it was better for her to figure it out on her own. Besides, I wanted to keep the surprise under wraps until I had sorted through our investments. Her eyes narrowed in annoyance. "We'll discuss this later. I'll give you a week to recover, and then we're going back to normal." "Not until I see a notarized report that you're free of all diseases," I shot back dismissively, turning my attention back to the computer. I spent most of the day in my home office, wondering how long it would take the kids to notice something was off. The kids came home early that morning, and I found a few apartments online that looked promising. I filled out the applications and made an appointment to visit them on Tuesday. I also printed out our financial statements for my lawyer meeting on Monday. Selling the house felt like a long shot, but at least knowing its value might help me determine what she owed me. Half the value in theory, though that felt like wishful thinking. The rest of the day was consumed by researching divorce laws in our state. I knew I was likely to get the short end of the stick, but it was crucial to understand just how much I might be losing. Having some knowledge would help me formulate a plan, or at the very least, give me a clearer picture of what lay ahead. "Dad, dinner's ready," Carly called, poking her head through the door. "Okay, sweetie, thanks," I replied. When I entered the kitchen, Kayla greeted me with a radiant smile. It was evident that her strategy was to smother me with kindness, trying to remind me of what I stood to lose if I didn't accept her choices. She had put in a lot of effort to prepare my favorite meal, dressing up and doing her hair in a style I liked. As I walked in, she approached me with a glass of wine. "I poured you a glass," she said, leaning in for a kiss. I noticed the pain in her eyes as I pulled away, taking the glass from her hand and pouring its contents down the sink. Instead, I retrieved a tumbler from the cabinet, dropped in a few ice cubes, and filled it with Jim Beam. There was no way the kids wouldn't notice this shift. I walked over to the dining table and sat down, engaging the kids in conversation while barely acknowledging Kayla. Dinner felt like a charade. I didn't even take anything from my plate, passing the bowls and plates around without looking at them. I focused on making small talk with the kids, but the tension was thick in the air. "Dad, aren't you going to eat anything?" Josh finally asked. "No, not hungry," I replied curtly. After what felt like the most awkward dinner in history, I got up, refilled my drink, and headed back to my office, leaving the remnants of the meal untouched. I didn't even help clear the table. About half an hour later, I shut down my computer, grabbed the keys to my truck, and left for a quiet restaurant where I could escape the chaos. After dinner, I stopped by a bar for a couple of drinks. By the time I got home, it was late, and I noticed Kayla's light still on in her bedroom. As I closed my door, I made sure to make enough noise for her to hear. I locked the door and slid a chair under the handle. Moments later, I heard her trying to turn the knob, followed by a few knocks. After about 5 minutes of her pleading, she finally gave up. The next morning, I woke up early with a sense of determination. Today was all about soccer. I planned to watch 3 games throughout the day. Yes, there were chores waiting for me, but I chose to ignore them. After all, I wouldn't be living here much longer. Kayla could delegate the tasks to someone else. I poured myself a cup of coffee and began preparing an omelet for breakfast. Just as I was finishing, Carly walked into the kitchen. "Hi, sweetie. Omelet?" I asked. "Sure, Dad. Thank you," she replied, taking her juice and sitting down at the table. I started cooking her omelet, and a few minutes later, Josh arrived. I promised to cook his as soon as I was done with Carly's. As I worked, I heard Kayla shuffling down the hallway. I poured the last of the coffee into my mug and turned off the kettle. She stepped into the kitchen, grabbing a cup from the cupboard and glancing at the empty pot. "You couldn't even leave a cup for me?" She stared at me in disbelief. "The pot is right here. You know how to cook," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "Never mind. I just made scrambled eggs." "Well, I guess you'll have to fend for yourself then," I replied, placing the last omelet on Josh's plate before walking out of the kitchen. By noon, I settled into the living room to watch the morning game. Kayla walked in, carrying a plate and a bottle of beer. "I brought you lunch and beer so you won't miss any of the games," she said cheerfully. Without a word, I kicked the plate and beer off the coffee table, sending them crashing to the floor. She stood there, mouth agape in shock. At that moment, a commercial came on, and I got up to grab a beer from the fridge. Yes, I could hear everyone's concerns about my drinking after the spill, but I didn't care. I was done pretending. The beer was all over the floor, and honestly, I had no intention of drinking any of it. The stuff she brought in was unwanted, and I figured it was her responsibility to clean up after herself. I wasn't about to let her stay just because of a mess. I wasn't planning on living there much longer anyway. "Kayla, we need to talk about this," I said firmly. "Shut up, game on," she shot back, dismissing me. "For God's sake, you need to do something about your attitude. The kids have already noticed how tense things are," I pressed, trying to make her see the bigger picture. "Oh, I'm sure they'll notice when I move out too," she retorted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Calm down, you're not moving out, and there won't be a divorce," she insisted as she turned away from me. It was close to noon when Carly and Josh walked into the room together, taking a seat on the couch across from me. Carly looked concerned. "Dad, what's going on between you and Mom?" I took a deep breath, knowing I had to be honest with them. "Well, you might have heard that your mom and I are getting a divorce. It has nothing to do with either of you. We both love you, but this is really just between me and your mom." "Why, though?" Josh asked, his brow furrowed. "Because your mother did something I just can't accept." "She knew how I felt about it, but she went ahead anyway without any remorse," I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. "You mean when she went on her date Friday night?" Carly interjected, a hint of disbelief in her voice. I was taken aback. "You know about this?" "Well, yeah, Mom told us you weren't thrilled about it," Carly said matter-of-factly. "So you know she cheated on me?" I pressed. "No, she didn't. She said she told you about it beforehand, so it wasn't cheating. She didn't sneak around behind your back," Josh chimed in, trying to defend his mother. I felt a pang of hurt. But that was only one of many promises she made to me. Just over 17 years ago, she vowed to me in front of God and our families to leave everyone else behind. That vow was supposed to last until death do us part. We're not dead, so how can I trust her promises now? "But you also vowed to be there for her in good times and bad," Josh argued, a hint of anger in his voice. "That's right, but your mother broke her vow first, which in turn releases me from mine," I shot back. Carly's expression shifted to one of confusion. "But why would you want to break up our family over just one night? Why am I being blamed for what she did? Mom's not going to leave, she just wants to move on and put this behind her." "You're the one making a big deal out of it," I countered. "If you leave, you'll ruin our family," Carly insisted, her voice rising in frustration. After that, things didn't get any better. I tried to explain my position, but it was clear they weren't interested in hearing me out. Their mother had been filling their heads with her perspective all day. All they understood was that Mom had done something she needed to do, and that Dad didn't love her enough to accommodate her needs. They believed I was the one tearing our family apart because I wouldn't let her have her one tiny slip-up. I couldn't believe they were so focused on that one night. After 20 years together, how could they not see the bigger picture? I let the conversation die down, and eventually, they left when they realized I wasn't budging on my stance. I finally managed to enjoy the rest of the game in peace. As the game wound down, I caught the aroma of dinner being prepared in the kitchen. It was one of my favorite meals, and I was looking forward to it. I settled in to watch the post-game show, but time was ticking. The next game was about to start in 20 minutes. Josh popped his head in and said, "Dinner's ready. I'm heading to the sports bar to watch the game. I'll grab something to eat there," I replied. "But Mom made it," he protested. "I'll be back after the game. I'll probably stay out for a while," I told him, heading out the door. At the bar, I enjoyed a fantastic burger with seasoned fries. The beer was good too, but I only had one. That was plenty to keep me safe to drive home. It was a quick 5-minute trip, and when I arrived, everyone was already in bed. I slipped into my room, locked the door, and went to sleep, feeling a slight smile on my face as I noticed the plate and bottle on the coffee table had been cleared away. Tuesday morning came early, and I was out of the house before anyone else was awake. Work went smoothly, and since I had taken the day off, I decided to look at apartments. I found a great 2-bedroom place and put down a deposit ready to move in on Saturday. A trip to the thrift store netted me a couch, a table, and chairs, all set to be delivered Saturday afternoon. I planned to keep the bed I had been using, along with everything in my home office. By the time I got home, I felt a renewed sense of hope and independence, ready to start this new chapter in my life. I walked into the house to find my family already deep into dinner. I couldn't help but grin, noticing that they hadn't even bothered to set a plate for me. That was perfectly fine. I wasn't planning to eat with them anyway. Instead, I made my way to the refrigerator and pulled out everything I needed to whip up a massive sandwich. After I piled the layers high, I grabbed a bag of chips and a cold beer, then headed to my office. "Geez, Dad, why are you acting like this?" Carly exclaimed as she entered my workspace. "Carly, let's just say your mother cheated on me. She had absolutely no respect for me, and then she threw it in my face. I'm not going to put up with that. I made it clear what the consequences would be if she went through with it, and she chose to do it anyway," I replied, trying to keep my tone steady. Carly rolled her eyes. "You can't be serious. You're going to ruin your family over this? Come on, it was just sex." I shook my head, incredulous. "Carly, think about your future. You're going to get married someday. Imagine if your husband told you one night that he had a date with a younger, prettier woman and was spending the night with her. How would that make you feel?" She shrugged, considering my words. "Well, I wouldn't like it. But if he promised to come back to me and it was just a one-time thing, I'd hope I loved him enough to get over it. Besides, if he told me beforehand, it wouldn't seem like cheating." "Do me a favor," I said, feeling a mixture of frustration and concern. "When you get married, look your fiancé in the eyes when you say your vows. When you reach the part about leaving everyone else behind, imagine how those loving eyes would turn to devastation when you tell him you're off having fun with another man." With that, I turned my back on her and returned to my work. Wednesday evening was an ambush. When I got home from work, both of my parents were already there. People often poke fun at their in-laws, but I genuinely got along well with Kella's parents. They had welcomed me into their family like the son they never had. Her father, Charles, was a tech enthusiast just like me, though he had questionable taste in cars. Still, I could overlook that because he owned a pristine '69 Mustang Fastback. "We want you to know that Kella's mother and I are very disappointed in what she did," Charles said, his voice steady. "But we think you're overreacting. Yes, she had sex with another man, and it was extremely disrespectful, especially the way she went about it. But it was just one mistake. You two have been together for 20 years and have 2 wonderful kids. Surely you can get over this." "A little mistake?" I shot back, my voice rising. "This wasn't just a small misstep, it was a planned event. They probably talked about it for at least a week, and she ambushed me an hour before she left, giving me no chance to object. This was an elaborate setup to trick me." My mom decided to jump in, her tone softer but firm. "She didn't cheat on you without telling you first." "First of all," I interrupted, "she didn't ask for my permission. She just said she was doing it, and I had no say in it. I told her exactly what would happen if she went through with it. My dad added, "I understand your pain and anger, but think about your family. We love you, son, and we're here to help you heal. But tearing your family apart is not the answer. Kayla still loves you and insists she won't do it again. With counseling and some effort, you can overcome this. We raised you to be a good man. You need to step up and keep your family together." I stood there completely stunned. My parents were actually siding with her, suggesting I accept her betrayal. It was too much to bear. I turned and walked out of the room, heading straight for my bedroom. Kayla tried to follow, but I closed the door in her face. 10 minutes later, I changed into jeans, a casual shirt, and boots. I didn't say a word as I walked through the living room and out the front door. They were still sitting there, trying to talk to me, but I didn't pay them any attention. I just walked out, got into my truck, and drove to a sports bar for some dinner and a few beers. Fortunately, the house was quiet and dark when I returned about 4 hours later. Thursday and Friday followed the same pattern. I completely ignored Kayla, and my kids were still mad at me. I was surprised Kayla hadn't noticed that the credit cards had stopped working. I figured she'd realize it when she went shopping that Saturday. On Friday night, I had been home for about an hour, sitting in my office, sorting through my belongings and deciding what to take with me tomorrow and what I would leave behind. Suddenly, Kayla opened the door and walked in, wearing a sheer nightgown, stockings, a garter belt, and heels. I have to admit, she looked stunning. "The kids are sleeping elsewhere tonight," she said, her voice sultry. "It's time for you to forget this nonsense and come to bed with me. I want you to make love to me all night. I really need you back." I stared at her for a moment, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. "No, thank you. Besides, I haven't seen the report from the clinic confirming that you don't have any medical conditions." "Stop being ridiculous," she shot back. "I need you back in my bed. Your tantrums aren't accomplishing anything. Now come on, I'm horny and I miss you." I'm Tom Williams, and my life took a dark turn when my wife, Kella, confronted me with an ultimatum. "I need sex," she insisted, her voice tinged with desperation. I couldn't help but feel the weight of her words. "If you don't give it to me, I'll have to call Clarence again." So what if it was a one-time thing? It felt like a slap in the face. Kella didn't seem to care about the damage her actions would cause. "Have fun with it," I shot back, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "Just let me know if you bring him here so I can leave." The look on her face was one I wouldn't forget, smoke practically pouring from her ears. It was a mix of anger and betrayal that hung in the air between us until she stormed out, tires screeching as she sped away, clearly taking advantage of the empty house. Once the silence settled, I began gathering my things. I disassembled our bed and loaded it into my truck, along with most of my clothes. Tonight, I'd be sleeping on the couch in my office. I poured myself a glass of Jim Beam on the rocks, the warmth of the whiskey grounding me, if only for a moment. The couch wasn't the most comfortable place I'd ever slept, but I was okay with that. Early the next morning, I found myself at the leasing office getting the key to my new apartment. After some heavy lifting and a few friendly neighbors pitching in, I managed to get everything moved in. When I returned home, the house was still empty. The neighbor's teenage son helped me load up my desk and office furniture. I took a moment to glance back at the living room and thought, screw it, I'll take the chair too. I was surprised that no one had noticed its absence. Later that evening, my phone rang. It was Carly. "Daddy, where are you?" she asked, her voice filled with confusion. "I'm home, honey," I replied, though I knew she wouldn't like my answer. "No, you're not. Your office is cleaned out. The bed, dresser, and spare bedroom are all gone. Your chair isn't in the living room either, and your truck is missing." "You're right. I'm not there anymore. I've moved into an apartment for now. Maybe after the divorce I'll buy a new house, but this will do for now." "Dad, I can't believe you're acting like this. I thought you loved us." Her voice trembled with hurt. "I do love you, sweetheart. I always have. But your mother is the one who destroyed our family. I told her this would happen if she went on that date, but she didn't listen." "She thought you loved her enough to get over it. I thought you loved her too," Carly said, her tone bitter. "Okay, whatever," she snapped before hanging up, leaving me reeling. The divorce had been a nightmare. Kella fought me every step of the way. Counseling was a disaster. She insisted I pay for it, and I stood firm that she should cover the cost since it was her idea. It was one of the few battles I actually won. The counselor didn't seem to like me much, possibly because I pointed out I was ordered to attend but not required to participate. After enduring all 12 sessions, the counselor finally gave up on us. Kella contested every little thing. A ridiculous poster from the garage that she once loathed suddenly became something she couldn't live without. The silly nightlight I'd had since college, which she despised, was now her excuse to redesign the entire office. It was clear she was just trying to make my life as difficult as possible. All this time, Kella made sure I didn't see the kids often. Eventually, the judge granted the divorce. I had to keep paying half the mortgage while she kept the house. Child support was set at $2,000 a month, but at least I got visitation every Wednesday night and every weekend. What really stung was the $11,000 a month spousal maintenance for 5 years, which would end if she remarried. I learned that Clarence had moved in with her before the divorce was even finalized. It felt like half my paycheck was going to support her new life while I was starting from scratch. I cashed out some investments and bought a small house that needed a lot of work, but was on a 1-acre lot, and at least I got it cheap. I managed to get all my tools out of the garage a week after moving in. Those tools were mine long before I even met Kella, and I wasn't about to let her claim them. Whenever she pushed, I reminded her of all the expensive jewelry and clothes she owned, but I kept my focus on the essentials of my new life. The house had electricity, gas, and running water. The roof was intact, and the walls were standing, good enough for me. As I moved in and started working on renovations during evenings and weekends, I couldn't help but think about visitation. Yes, I was supposed to have that, but it turned into a disaster. Kella did everything she could to prevent it. The kids were always busy. It seemed they went away with friends on weekends. My weekends. Kayla has dance practice on Wednesday, and Josh has an important test on Thursday that he needs to study for. The few times I did manage to see the kids, they treated me with hostility. They blamed me for everything, and no matter how I tried to explain my side of the story, it felt like an uphill battle. Their resentment was palpable. After just a few visits, they bluntly told me they didn't want to see me anymore. I could have fought for my rights, but what would that accomplish? Forcing them to see me would only deepen their resentment. I sent them gift cards and letters for birthdays and Christmas, but they all came back unopened. Still, I continued to send them, hoping that one day they would realize I hadn't given up on them. I couldn't shake the feeling of neglect as I glanced through the checks I saw being cashed, but I never received a single word of acknowledgement. Graduation day had come and gone. I assumed my kids must have graduated, but I didn't hear a peep about it. In a desperate attempt to reconnect, I sent a registered letter outlining the college funds I had set up for them. The response? Silence. Kayla had made good on her promise to set the kids against me, and I found myself consumed by work and the upkeep of the house, isolating myself from everything else. It was surprising how much money I saved living this way. But at what cost? One day, I finally decided to call my mom. "Hey, Mom," I said when she picked up. "How's everything going?" "Oh, things are great, as you'd expect," she replied cheerfully. "By the way, I haven't heard anything about Thanksgiving. Are we having it again this year?" A heavy silence lingered on the line. "Mom, are you still there?" I asked, my heart sinking. Yeah, it's just a little awkward. We're having Thanksgiving, but Kayla and her parents are coming, along with her new boyfriend. We figured your presence might make things tense for everyone. After all, the kids are still upset with you for leaving." "Seriously, Mom? You're ditching your own son for Thanksgiving and inviting my ex-wife and her new boyfriend instead?" I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "We want to maintain a close relationship with our grandchildren," she explained, her tone firm. "Besides, this is on you. You should have worked to keep the family together, not tear it apart. Why don't you come over for Christmas Eve? Your father and I will be at Kayla's on Christmas Day, but we can celebrate with you the day before." "Whatever," I muttered, frustration boiling inside me. I ended the call feeling more isolated than ever. That Christmas Eve, I stayed home, choosing to watch Die Hard instead of joining my family. My phone buzzed incessantly with messages from my mom asking where I was, but I ignored them all. I wasn't in a festive mood. All I could think about were the packages I'd sent to my kids, which were returned to me last week. 5 years had passed, and I had just received a wedding announcement. Kayla had married Clarence the weekend after I made my final maintenance payment. Josh had turned 18 a year early, freeing me from child support. It felt surreal. After years of obligation, I was finally liberated from my ex-wife's family and all that came with it. I celebrated my newfound freedom by getting drunk. I won't lie, I wasn't proud of it, but after pouring my heart into a family that rejected me, I felt entitled to a little self-indulgence. Now that my obligations were over, I made a decision. I would push them out of my mind as much as possible. They clearly didn't want a relationship with me, so I'd move on with my life. Except for one lingering issue. I still had to pay half the mortgage on the house. That would end when Josh graduated. But my name remained on the deed. Kayla seemed to think she owned the house outright, but the divorce stipulated she could live there only until the kids finished high school. Now that Josh had graduated, I was entitled to half of the property. I contacted my attorney to begin the process. When we divorced, the house was appraised at around $300,000, with about $200,000 in equity. That was 5 years ago. Since then, property values had skyrocketed in our area, and I calculated that the house's value had risen to about $500,000, with $450,000 in equity left. We only had $50,000 left on the mortgage. Why was I doing this? For the money, of course. Who wouldn't want an extra $250,000? Plus, it would drive Kayla crazy. She adored that house, and the thought of having to give me a penny would infuriate her. I was eager for some payback for all she had put me through. It would also reimburse me for all the maintenance and mortgage payments I had made for her over the years. About a week later, I received a call from Kayla. "Tom, what's going on?" "Not much. Just working and fixing up my new place," I replied casually. "I'm surprised you called," she said, a hint of sarcasm in her voice. "This is the first time you've reached out since the divorce." "Actually, I'm calling because I heard a realtor was at my house looking for my signature on a sales contract." "Yeah, that's because both our names are on the title. She'll need your signature to sell it," I said, feigning nonchalance. "What sale?" she asked, incredulity seeping into her tone. "I love that house, and I'm not going to sell it." "Well, when can I expect a check for my half of the equity?" "Nice try," she snapped. "I got the house in the divorce. Actually, you only got to live in it until Josh graduated. That happened last month. Now we can either sell it and split the proceeds, or you can buy me out." "You think I'm going to give you $100,000 for a house I own?" she shouted, disbelief in her voice. "Now hold on. I'm not asking for $100,000. Since the equity is about $450,000, my half is $225,000. With all the expensive furniture you insisted on, let's round it up to $250,000. "You're insane!" she yelled, and the call abruptly ended. I couldn't help but laugh when she hung up. Yes, my lawyer would take his cut, but it was worth it to see the look on her face when the judge ruled in my favor a couple of months later. I even managed to convince the judge to make her pay her own legal fees for bringing me to court over this mess. In the end, I realized I was reclaiming not just my financial freedom, but also a sense of control over my life that I thought I'd lost forever. It felt good to finally take a stand. This was something that could have been settled outside the courtroom, but it had escalated beyond that. The house appraised for more than I had anticipated, including the value of the furniture, totaling a solid $775,000. Instead of putting it on the market, they decided to buy me out. I later learned they primarily used Clarence's money for the buyout, which eventually landed him in a bit of trouble, but that's a story for another time. Once I got the house sorted out, I decided to build a decent-sized workshop in the backyard. I also picked up an old 1972 Chevy pickup truck, which was in rough shape. I wasn't too concerned about its current condition, as I intended to replace most of the parts anyway. Over the past year, I meticulously took it apart, cleaned each component, and gave it a fresh coat of paint. When the bodywork was complete, it was time to focus on the engine. The rear differential was still in good condition, but I rebuilt it to ensure it could handle the power I was planning to put into it. I opted for a Borg-Warner T10 4-speed manual transmission, which was known for its speed, but the real fun was going to be under the hood. I sourced a 427 big block engine online from a parts depot, bought it, and had it shipped to my workshop. Once it arrived, I set it up on the stand and started the disassembly process. I sent it off to a machine shop to bore out the cylinders and make adjustments for connecting rods and camshafts. I installed a new forged crankshaft with oversized pistons, a hefty cam, and had the heads ported and polished. Then, to top it all off, I added a supercharger. I knew I'd be visiting more gas stations than tire shops with this beast, but I was ready for it. The first time I hit the road, I learned an important lesson. I punched the gas while cruising down the highway, and instantly, the rear tires blew out. I barely managed to regain control of the truck before easing off the pedal. From that moment on, I took things a bit more cautiously. A few weeks later, I spotted an advertisement for a local car show open to the public. Thinking it would be a great opportunity to showcase my hard work, I filled out the entry form and paid the fee. On the day of the event, I loaded up the Chevy and drove to the park. After registering, I found my designated spot. As I was setting up my display, I noticed a pristine 1968 GTO parked beside me. While I arranged my shade structure, a couple of attractive red-headed women caught my eye. One was about my age, and the other, who I guessed was her daughter, looked around 10 years old. Definitely still a schoolgirl. What stood out was that there was no man accompanying them, nor did I see any ring on the older woman's left hand. Intrigued, I decided to make the first move. "Good morning. I really like your car," I said cheerfully as I approached. Both of them looked up from what they were doing. "Hi. Thanks. I like your truck too," the older one replied with a warm smile. "Have you been to many of these events?" I asked, hoping to keep the conversation flowing. "This is my first time participating," I admitted. "I've been to car shows before, but only as a spectator. My name is Tom, by the way." Marie, the older woman, introduced herself. "This is my daughter, Jenny. We've been to this show a few times. My ex-husband has hosted it before." "Well, since you're both veterans, why don't you join me in the shade once you're done? I have a cooler full of drinks, and I could use some insider tips on these events." We ended up spending most of the day together, occasionally wandering off to chat with other car enthusiasts, but mostly enjoying each other's company. Although I didn't win any awards, I felt a sense of accomplishment just being there. As we talked, Marie opened up about her divorce from her husband 3 years earlier. She had caught him cheating with his boss's wife. They had reached a peculiar agreement. She would return all the videos he had recorded if he let her keep the GTO. It was a strategic move on her part, ensuring he remained financially stable enough to pay alimony. Jenny chimed in, expressing her anger toward her father for his betrayal and revealing that she no longer had any contact with him. I felt a sense of camaraderie with them as we shared our stories. When the show began to wind down, I suggested we grab dinner at Red Lobster, just a couple of blocks away. They agreed, and we headed over together. Over dinner, I found myself sharing my own highlights, the ups and downs of my marriage, how my kids had distanced themselves from me after the divorce. "So, your wife cheated, and your kids blame you for the split?" Jenny asked, incredulous. I nodded, feeling a pang of regret. I tried to explain it to them, but by then their mother had already turned them against me. Marie reached out, placing her hand on my shoulder. "I'm really sorry, Tom. You're a good person. You don't deserve to go through something like this." Grateful for her kindness, I decided to steer the conversation to lighter topics, and we spent the next hour laughing and enjoying each other's company. There was an undeniable connection forming, and when we exchanged numbers, Marie readily agreed to meet again. As they left, I noticed Jenny giving me a broad smile and 2 enthusiastic thumbs up, which made me realize she was on board with my budding relationship with her mother. The following weekend, I called Marie and proposed a dinner and dancing date. She accepted with enthusiasm, and as I walked her to the door after the evening, I leaned in and kissed her gently on the cheek. Turning around, I saw Jenny watching from the window, beaming and giving me 2 thumbs up. After a couple more dates, I invited them both over for dinner. I had learned to cook quite well since my divorce, thanks to the Food Network, some YouTube tutorials, and plenty of practice. My lasagna had become a specialty of mine, and I was excited to share it with them. As I settled into my new life, I could tell that Marie and her daughter really loved my house. However, I couldn't help but overhear Marie tell Jenny that it definitely needed a more feminine touch. Honestly, I wouldn't have argued if I had been asked to help out. The following weekend, I received an invitation to their home. Marie's cooking was impressive, so much so that my own feeble attempts at culinary skills felt shameful. Even Kella, who usually dazzled me with her cooking, seemed to pale in comparison. I know it's rude to overindulge, but I simply couldn't stop eating. Eventually, I had to apologize for being a pig, but they just laughed it off, saying it was the highest compliment to a woman who loves to cook. Marie mentioned that Jenny was almost as skilled in the kitchen as she was. 2 weekends later, I took Marie out for dinner, followed by a night at a dance club. We danced for a while, lost in the rhythm, when a slow song began to play. We pressed against each other, swaying to the music. I couldn't help but kiss her, and it quickly turned passionate. Then, leaning in closer, she whispered in my ear, "Take me home." Honestly, I was taken aback. I thought we were having an incredible time, and suddenly she wanted to leave. I pulled back to gauge her expression, and she must have read the confusion on my face because she started giggling. "Oh, you silly man. I meant take me to your house." Thank goodness I had my reliable truck instead of the old '72 model. I wasn't sure I could have kept it on the road in that thing. So I went for it. I made her breakfast before driving her home, and I got another double thumbs up from the red-headed teenager peeking out the window. A few months later, I decided to pop the question, and she said yes. Our wedding was a simple affair in front of a judge, and afterward, she and Jenny moved into my house. Jenny even started calling me Daddy, which warmed my heart. Life was wonderful. Yes, there were disagreements. Jenny was a teenager, and I was the authority figure. I had to say no sometimes, but she respected me, and her mom loved me just as much as I loved her. About a year later, I received an unexpected call from a number I didn't recognize. "Hello?" I answered, unsure of what to expect. "Hi, Daddy," a cheerful female voice chirped on the other end. "It's Carly." "Carly? Is that really you?" I could hardly contain my excitement. "It's so good to hear from you." "I have some great news," she exclaimed. "Really? What is it?" I asked, my heart racing with hope. "I'm getting married," she said, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. "That's wonderful, honey. I'm so happy for you," I responded, genuinely thrilled. "Of course I want to be there." "I want you at my wedding too," she added, her tone shifting slightly. "Of course. It's one of the greatest honors for a father to walk his daughter down the aisle," I said, envisioning that proud moment. But then she dropped a bombshell. "I've organized the wedding fund through Clarence. He'll be the one walking me down the aisle. Since it'll be awkward for you and Mom to sit together, you won't be sitting in the front pew." I felt my heart drop. "Wait, you're marrying Clarence? The same guy your mother cheated on me with?" I couldn't hide my disbelief. "Did she really marry that scumbag?" "Dad, I'm trying to rebuild our relationship, and I wanted you there," Carly replied, frustration creeping into her voice. "After you left, Mom and Clarence started dating more seriously, fell in love, and eventually got married. It's your fault. If you hadn't left, they wouldn't have continued seeing each other." I could feel my anger boiling over. "I see you're still under the impression that your mother did nothing wrong. Because of that, I can't attend the ceremony for 2 reasons. First, I won't support a marriage I believe is doomed to fail. If he's any good, he'll eventually kick you to the curb just like your mother did to me. Second, you just stole my last chance to walk my daughter down the aisle and gave it to a woman who broke our family apart. That shows just how self-centered you are." "Fine. If you're going to be like that, don't expect to see your grandchildren. I want nothing to do with you," Carly shot back. "Really, Dad? Mom's right. You really are an ass," she snapped before hanging up. That was the last I heard from her. Feeling crushed, I realized that any hope of a relationship with my daughter was slipping away. Later that evening, while I was tinkering with my truck, I was frustrated at how my life had spiraled. I had rebuilt the engine, making it more powerful and reliable. But it didn't seem to matter. I was consumed by thoughts of Carly's words. Suddenly, I noticed Jenny peeking around the corner, her expression concerned.
"Carly was just here,"
she said quietly. "I know," I replied, my voice heavy with emotion. "She's angry at me for what happened with her mother." "She called you an ass, didn't she?" Jenny asked, her brows furrowing. "Yes," I sighed. "I was hoping she would finally understand what her mother did to us." Just then, my phone buzzed with a new call. I didn't recognize the number, but answered nonetheless. "Hello?" I said cautiously. "Hi, is this Carly Williams?" The voice on the other end was assertive. "Yes, it is." "What can I do for you?" I asked, sensing trouble. "You can stop calling my dad and harassing him." The tone was icy. "He's the best man I've ever known, and he doesn't deserve a spoiled brat like you reminding him of your family's dysfunction." "Who the hell are you?" I shot back, caught off guard. "My name is Jenny Williams. I'm your sister. My mom married your ex-dad and he adopted me. I love him, and I would never disrespect him like you do. You're an insult to daughters everywhere." "I don't care about your sob story," I snapped. "I know all about what happened," she continued, her voice steady. "Your mother went out, disrespected her husband, and slept with another man. And the saddest part? You don't seem to care." I felt my blood boil. "You don't know anything about me. Let me tell you this. My biological father cheated on my mom, and she kicked him to the curb without hesitation. If you want to be angry at anyone, direct it at yourself." I slammed the phone down, my heart racing. This wasn't how I envisioned my life, divided, filled with bitterness and unresolved issues. You can bet that if my mom ever cheated on my dad, I would have been right there helping him toss her out with the rest of the trash. Even though he isn't my biological father, he's the most decent, caring, and compassionate man I've ever known. Honestly, I've been thinking about sending your mother a card thanking her for being such a fool for letting him go. If it weren't for her poor judgment, I wouldn't have the father I have today. Oh, and you can let your grandparents know they have another granddaughter, but I want nothing to do with someone so despicable that she would reject my own son in favor of a cheating, manipulative mother and her traitorous offspring. And here's a little advice for you. When you exchange your mock vows, look into your husband's eyes and think about the moment he decides to cheat on you. When that happens, call me and tell me all about it so I can have a good laugh at your expense. Enjoy your life, sis." I just sat there, staring at my phone in shock. First, I couldn't believe my dad had gotten married without telling us. You'd think he'd at least send an invitation to his kids. Then I found out I had a younger sister now. A strange thought crossed my mind. She looked a lot like me. Before my mom told Josh and me that Dad was leaving and tearing our family apart over something so trivial, I assumed Dad had a good reason for doing what he did. I figured I could live with him instead of Mom. But then Mom explained how she was feeling fine and just needed a brief moment to recharge. After all, it was just a fleeting incident compared to how long they had been together. Besides, she was willing to work things out, and Dad was the one being stubborn. He was the one leaving us behind. I couldn't believe how rude she was being to me. She wouldn't even give me a chance to explain that Dad was the one who had abandoned us, and Mom was just trying to move on. It was like she didn't care that it was just one moment that shouldn't overshadow their entire relationship. And then she had the nerve to call me all sorts of vile names. She didn't even know me. What was Dad so upset about? Of course, Clarence would walk me down the aisle. He'd been there for me for the past few years. I hadn't spoken to Dad since Josh and I confronted him about leaving. On top of that, Clarence was paying nearly $20,000 for my wedding. I couldn't even imagine the pennies Dad could scrape together for something so important. Half an hour later, my mom and both grandmothers came in, and I was still stewing over those phone calls. They had been out shopping, and Mom noticed my mood right away. "Honey, what's wrong?" "I told Dad about the wedding and asked him to come. I thought he'd want to be there since I'm his only daughter." I hoped it could be a step toward rebuilding our relationship, I explained. Oh, that's wonderful, exclaimed Grandma Williams. Is he coming? I sighed. No. He got mad when I told him Clarence would walk me down the aisle. I thought it would be too awkward for him to sit in the front pew with Mom and Clarence.
That's too bad. I thought he would have gotten over his stubbornness by now, she said.
Well, if that's not enough, I just found out I have a half-sister, I said, my voice dripping with disbelief. The girl who called herself Jenny Williams said Dad married her mom and adopted her. She wasn't very nice on the phone either. The nicest thing she said was that she wanted to thank my mom for being stupid, or she wouldn't have such a great dad. I recounted both conversations to my family, and they were shocked by how vehemently Dad and Jenny had spoken. Tom got married, and we weren't even invited, my grandmother whispered, almost in disbelief. He didn't even tell us about it? And now we have another granddaughter? My wedding day finally arrived, and for a brief moment I thought about what my father had said. I felt a twinge of sadness knowing he wouldn't be there to celebrate my special day. But then I remembered that I had reached out to him, and he had rejected me. I brushed it aside. After all, this was a happy day. I was marrying the man I truly loved, the man I wanted to spend my life with. As I walked down the aisle, Clarence radiated happiness as he took my hand. The music of the wedding march filled the air, and I felt pure joy looking at my friends and family. Both my grandparents were there, and Josh was one of Bobby's groomsmen. Everyone was there to celebrate, and tears of joy filled my eyes as I saw Bobby smiling at me, standing at the altar. As we passed by Mom, I caught her eye. Pride lit up her face, and tears streamed down her cheeks too. Clarence lifted my veil, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "Congratulations, baby girl." Then he handed me over to my future husband. A strange feeling washed over me when the priest asked, "Who gives this bride away?" And Clarence replied, "Her mother and I." Something felt off, but in that moment, I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I quickly pushed the thought aside and focused on the happiness surrounding me, ready to embrace my new life. As the priest began the ceremony, I locked eyes with the love of my life. I stood there ready to repeat my vows, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, in good times and in bad, for richer or poorer. But when I looked directly into Bobby's eyes, the words caught in my throat. Suddenly, I was flooded with memories of what my dad had told me on the phone, and the image in my mind shifted. Instead of seeing my soulmate, I envisioned him with another woman, just like that. The warmth of the moment turned cold, and I found myself looking into the eyes of a broken man, the words I never thought I'd say spilling out before I could stop them.
"Bobby, I can't do this,"
I said, the audience gasping in shock at my abrupt revelation. It felt as if a heavy weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and a genuine smile broke across my face. "I finally get it," I said to Bobby, feeling a sense of clarity wash over me. "That's great, Carly. But what did you realize?" he asked, a mix of hope and confusion in his voice. "Absolutely everything," I replied, my tone suddenly serious. "Bobby, do you really love me?" "Of course I love you. How can you even ask that?" he shot back, bewildered. "I have to ask because I can't marry you today," I declared, feeling the air rush out of the room. Gasps echoed as the realization sank in. "We will get married, just not today. This feels wrong, and I have to make it right. I'm only getting married once, and it will be for life, so it has to be perfect." "What's wrong?" Bobby pressed, concern etched on his face. "I love you with everything I have. I'm going to marry you." I could see the confusion growing in his eyes, and I knew I had to explain. "I need to correct a mistake I made a few years ago." "What mistake?" he asked, bewildered. "The biggest mistake of my life," I replied, my voice steady. "The mistake I made when I listened to your mother instead of standing up for my dad. I blamed him for our family breaking apart when it was your mom who cheated on him." "Carly, I'm your mother. You need to show me some respect," she interjected, her voice rising. "Respect? Mom, you're the last person who deserves it," I shot back. "Once a cheater, always a cheater. I can't believe I ever equated myself with you." It wasn't until I looked into Bobby's eyes while saying my vows that I realized how horrible you truly are. Looking into his eyes made me understand how much it would hurt if he ever cheated on me. I realized how much I would hurt him if I ever betrayed him. I guess Dad was a better role model than you ever were. What do you mean? She asked, fear flashing in her eyes. Really, Mom? Do you think I don't know about your Wednesday workouts with Jim Davis, your personal trainer? You're always at his apartment instead of the gym. It's funny how you only go to the gym to see him, I said, my voice rising. And what about Carlos, your pool guy? He takes an extra hour every 2 weeks because he's screwing you on the chaise lounge after he cleans the pool. You've been sleeping with the landscaping crew every time they finish their work. I even have video footage of me coming home early a couple of times if you try to deny it. And let's not forget how you tip Mario, your barber, by giving him a little something extra in the back room after every haircut. At least C doesn't have to worry about you cheating on him with your boss. I could see Clarence's expression morph into one of shock as I laid bare her dirty laundry, realizing I had said it loud enough for everyone to hear. My gaze shifted back to him, and an evil thought crossed my mind. Oh, and Clarence? Before God and all these witnesses, I swear with the same commitment my mother showed when she made her wedding vows that I will pay you back every cent you spent on this wedding. We all know how well she keeps her promises, so you can expect me to honor this vow just like she honors hers. He shouldn't hold his breath waiting for even a dime. With her distracted, I pulled Bobby down the aisle, stopping quickly to speak with the videographer. He had caught the entire spectacle on camera, and I signed the authorization form to post the video on YouTube, hoping it would go viral and amplify my mother's shame. Bobby and I dashed into the parking lot. He had driven here, and our bags were in the trunk, waiting to be moved into the limo before the reception. I knew my dad would appreciate Bobby as I slid into the passenger seat, excitement coursing through me when he turned the ignition. The powerful roar of the 440 cubic inch engine was exhilarating. Sure, it wasn't a GM, but this 1969 Challenger was still a beast. Where are we going? He asked as we tore out of the parking lot. Go west on 156. I'll find the address and plug it into Waze, I replied, already working my phone. It wasn't hard. I knew the town he lived in. A quick search of the real estate records gave me all the details I needed. He was about 2 hours away, and we could only hope he'd be home when we got there. We didn't stop to change clothes. I was on a mission, determined not to waste any time. This wasn't a common occurrence, and I intended to make it count. You open the front door, and there they are. A woman in a stunning wedding dress and a man in a sharp tuxedo standing nervously on the porch. If I were a priest living in a church, I might expect this sort of thing to happen now and then, but I wasn't a priest, and I definitely didn't live at a church. What truly threw me was the unmistakable realization that the woman was my oldest daughter, Carly, who had made it abundantly clear that she wanted nothing to do with me anymore. Today was supposed to be her wedding day, and yet here she was, standing on my doorstep instead of at the church or the reception or wherever newlyweds should be. "Daddy, can I talk to you for a minute, please?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. Stunned, I stepped back and let them inside. I gestured toward the living room where my wife Marie and our youngest daughter Jenny were sitting. The shocked expressions on their faces mirrored my own. "Oh, Carly, this is my wife Marie and our daughter Jenny," I introduced them, my heart racing. "Jenny, Marie, this is Carly." I hesitated, unsure who the man with her was. "Oh, yes, Dad, this is my fiancé, Bobby Jensen," Carly said, turning to him with a mixture of pride and anxiety. "Bobby, this is my dad, Tom Williams, my wife Marie, and my sister Jenny." "Fiancé?" I echoed, bewildered. "I thought you just got married a couple of hours ago. What's going on?" Carly looked at the floor, then back at me, her eyes brimming with emotion. "That's what I need to talk to you about. I can't go through with the wedding unless you walk me down the aisle." "Daddy, I finally understand. You were right all along. I'm sorry for everything I said and did. I got caught up in Mom's drama and blamed you for things that weren't your fault. It was Mom who gave up on us, not you." I was taken aback. My daughter, who had distanced herself from me for so long, was standing here seeking forgiveness. "I won't make excuses for my behavior," she continued, her voice steady. "I was young and foolish, and I listened to the wrong people. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me." I really want to marry Bobby. He's an incredible guy, and I know you'll like him, but I can't marry him unless you agree to walk me down the aisle." Her words hung in the air, unexpected and profound. I was thrilled that Carly wanted me back in her life, yet the enormity of the situation loomed over us like a dark cloud. "So, what happened at the wedding?" I asked, curiosity piqued. "I mean, you're in your wedding dress and Bobby's in a tuxedo. You were supposed to be getting married." Carly glanced at Bobby, then back at me. "Oh yes, we were already halfway through the ceremony when I had an epiphany." She held out her phone. "You should watch this." Bobby dashed to the car to grab their suitcase while Marie escorted Carly to the bedroom to change. As they did, I set up the video player connected to our big-screen TV in the living room. Once Carly and Bobby returned, I hit play. The video started like any wedding ceremony. Groomsmen walked the bridesmaids down the aisle, and Bobby entered with the priest, ring in hand. Everything seemed typical until Carly began to recite her vows. Suddenly, she hesitated, struggling to find her words.
I can't believe she actually did it,
Jenny whispered, her eyes wide. I turned to her, about to ask what she meant, when Carly stopped trying to speak and boldly confronted her mother on the video. The revelations that spilled out shocked me. Carly spoke about her mother's infidelity since her marriage to Clarence, and the realization that washed over her was clear. By the time the video ended, Carly and Bobby had changed clothes and returned to the living room, their expressions a mix of relief and determination.
I just couldn't go through with it,
Carly explained, her voice shaking slightly.
When I looked into Bobby's eyes,
I realized how much it would hurt him if I did to him what Mom did to you. I finally understood what vows truly meant, and how Mom had broken that promise to you. I realized how much she dishonored you, and by marrying Bobby without you by my side, I would be doing the same thing. Carly paused, her eyes glistening with emotion. How could I say such solemn vows in a ceremony where the most honorable person I know, my dad, wasn't present? If I wanted those vows to mean something, you had to be the one to walk me down the aisle. Her words struck a chord in my heart. I've always believed that values and integrity matter above all else, she continued. When I marry Bobby, it should be you standing by my side, not Mom and Clarence. She glanced at Jenny, who smiled brightly. And besides, I need my little sister to be one of my bridesmaids. It was your support that woke me up. I remember what you said to me while I was trying to say my vows. How can I get married if you won't stand by my side? We talked for a few more hours, and during that time, I learned that Jenny had taken the initiative to get Carly's phone number from my contacts. After Carly's call that afternoon, she reached out to her sister, bridging the gap that had kept us apart for too long. As the evening wore on, I suggested they stay the night in the guest bedroom. It felt like a new beginning, a chance to rebuild the relationships that had been frayed by misunderstandings and heartache. As I watched my daughters share laughter and stories, I couldn't help but feel hope stirring in my heart, ready to embrace this new chapter of our lives together. That evening, Carly received a flurry of phone calls. She ignored the ones from Clarence and Kella, but several friends reached out as well. It turned out that many guests had taken her up on her invitation to have some fun at Clarence's expense. Despite his best efforts to cancel, it was too late for a refund. By the time he arrived at the reception venue, dozens of people were already there, reveling in the open bar while the food was being prepared and the servers, bartenders, and DJ were hard at work. Eventually, Clarence surrendered to the situation, grabbed a drink, and sulked in a corner booth, hoping to drown his sorrows. Meanwhile, Josh sent Carly a video he shot on his phone of his mom confronting Clarence. The scene was explosive, with Clarence shouting angrily. Cheating seemed to be the focal point of their heated exchange. From the looks of it, that relationship was on the brink of collapse. Josh had managed to cancel his plane and resort reservations, but he had to pay a 20% penalty for not canceling in time. Since Carly and Bobby had taken time off for their honeymoon, they spent the week with us. During that time, I reconnected with the daughter I thought I had lost. I also got to know Bobby better. He was a genuinely great guy with strong morals. Initially, there was some tension between Bobby and me. The only things he had heard about me were the twisted tales spun by Kella and my son and daughter. They weren't outright lies, but they were certainly embellished narratives that painted me as the villain who abandoned his family. As the truth began to surface, Bobby's attitude towards me softened. It helped that I showed him my store and introduced him to my latest projects. Although he was more into classic Dodges, we found common ground in our shared passion for cars. At least he wasn't one of those guys who drove an automatic. His Challenger had a manual transmission. By midweek, Carly and Bobby set a new wedding date. The ceremony would take place at the same venue on the same weekend the following year, and this time I would be paying for the wedding and walking her down the aisle. Marie was also going to pitch in, and Jenny was excited about being a bridesmaid. Carly and Bobby called everyone in the wedding party with the good news. Well, everyone except Kayla and Clarence. Over the next few months, Carly and I worked diligently to rebuild our relationship. Bobby and I continued to bond, attending several car shows together. We participated in events with Marie's GTO, my '72 truck, Bobby's Challenger, and even coaxed Jenny into joining us with the '74 Firebird I had bought for her. Carly and Bobby visited a couple of times each month, and Josh made appearances too. It was more challenging with him since he had always been closer to his mom, but we were slowly mending our relationship. I suspected he did it more for Carly's sake than mine, but I appreciated it nonetheless. Josh brought news from home, and it wasn't good. Things were spiraling out of control between Kayla and Clarence. Clarence had moved out and filed for divorce. The silver lining for Kayla was that Clarence had cited irreconcilable differences rather than adultery, which meant the harsh penalties outlined in their prenup wouldn't apply. He filed in such a way that the process would be quick and painless. For Clarence, the prenup worked in his favor. It stated that all property he owned before marrying Kayla wouldn't be subject to division in the divorce. While she would receive half of the assets acquired during their marriage, that still wouldn't amount to much given the property they had acquired beforehand. Kayla would primarily walk away with the house and about $50,000. Clarence did try to stake a claim on the house, but he had no solid proof of entitlement. Sure, his money was used to buy out my share after the divorce, but he lacked documentation to substantiate that claim. Apparently, he had taken out a business loan for his company to get the funds, but he never recorded what he spent it on. Plus, his name wasn't even on the title since the house had belonged to Kayla before they married. When he tried to discuss the matter, she flat out refused. In the end, Clarence paid off the loan but achieved nothing for it. By the time he realized that the funds he invested in the house wouldn't be returned, it was too late to file for adultery. Rumors about Kayla's escapades spread quickly, and her reputation in the community took a severe hit. Friends began to distance themselves, and invitations to parties and charity events dried up. To make matters worse, Kayla, who didn't work and depended on Clarence's income, found herself in dire financial straits. Clarence learned a hard lesson. He lost a couple $100,000 buying out my half of the house, another $28,000 for a wedding that collapsed, and then $50,000 to Kayla in the divorce settlement. The humiliation of it all wasn't lost on either of them. Furious that her indiscretions were now public knowledge, Kayla began telling her remaining friends that she cheated on Clarence because of his lack of performance in the bedroom. She claimed he had a small penis and didn't even know how to use it properly. She also insisted to her girlfriends that he refused to engage in certain intimate acts while demanding that she do so. This kind of gossip spread like wildfire, and it wasn't long before the women he attempted to pick up at bars were well aware of the drama surrounding him. As the chaos unfolded, I felt a mix of empathy and vindication. I had moved on, focusing on my own family and the relationships I was rebuilding. It was clear that while Clarence and Kayla were entangled in their own mess, I was carving out a new path for myself, one filled with love, laughter, and the promise of better days ahead. As I watched Kayla, my ex-wife, enter the venue, I couldn't help but chuckle to myself. She had become something of a recluse, only venturing out for work and then heading straight home. It was as if her social life had evaporated. "Are you ready, Daddy?" my oldest daughter, Carly, asked, her excitement evident. "No father ever truly wants to let his daughters go," I replied, "but I'm honored to do it for you." As the doors opened, music flooded the church and I stepped inside, starting with my left foot, proudly leading my daughter down the aisle. A quick glance at the crowd revealed my ex-wife sitting in the fourth row, while my wife Marie occupied a place of honor in the front row. I would join her shortly, but first, I had one last important duty to fulfill. "Who gives this woman to be married?" I asked, my voice ringing clear. "As her father, I give her to Bobby," I declared, leaning in to kiss Carly gently on the cheek before handing her over to her fiancé. I should mention that this wasn't my idea. It was Carly who requested I do it this way. I took my seat next to Marie as the ceremony continued. "To have and to hold, in sickness and in health, in good times and bad," Carly recited, her voice practically soaring at the end. The audience erupted in applause as the newlyweds shared their first kiss, marking the beginning of their new life together. From my vantage point at the head table, I noticed Marie's warm smile beside me. However, I couldn't miss Kella sitting alone at a table on the side, her expression sour as she glanced at Marie. It was clear she was taking advantage of the open bar, perhaps to dull the sharpness of her disappointment. Clarence, her new partner, hadn't been invited. To be honest, I wasn't sure if he would have attended even if he had been. Completing my last significant task for my daughter, I felt a sense of accomplishment. I had walked her down the aisle, celebrated their love with a heartfelt toast, and danced with her for the father-daughter dance. Afterward, I joined Marie for a dance while Carly and Bobby, along with his parents, took their turn on the dance floor. As I settled next to Marie at the table, I noticed my youngest daughter dancing with a group of guys, clearly enjoying the attention. Just then, a familiar voice broke through the noise. "Excuse me, may I borrow your husband for a dance?" Kayla asked, her eyes glinting with mischief. Marie hesitated, glancing at me. "Just be sure to return him in one piece," she replied, her tone light but her expression serious. She then looked at me, saying, "I trust you, but I don't trust her to not do something foolish." Reluctantly, I followed Kayla to the dance floor as a slow song began. I suspected she had chosen this moment deliberately. Trying to maintain a respectful distance, we started to dance. After a moment, she broke the silence. "You were supposed to give me that one night," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We were supposed to forget everything and go back to how it was. Tonight was meant to be just the two of us. I left that night because you couldn't understand the consequences of your actions," I responded, keeping my tone calm. "You shouldn't have assumed I would cheat, no matter how many times you did." Her eyes flared with anger. "I didn't cheat. I told you beforehand. I didn't sneak around behind your back." "That doesn't change the fact that you chose to sleep with someone else," I retorted. "It was betrayal, plain and simple. I never wanted this. I only wanted one night to remember. And then we could be together forever." Kayla sighed deeply. "You know you're the only man I've ever truly loved. I've never felt that way about anyone else. The man I married was just someone to fill the void you left." "Then why did you marry him?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Because you divorced me. I thought I could learn to love him. I didn't want to be alone," she confessed, her voice shaking. "But I could never get over you. All those affairs I had were out of anger and desperation. When I realized that you were all I ever needed, it was too late." "But you still cheated on him," I pointed out, trying to understand her logic. "I thought you could train him, but he didn't listen. How does that justify your actions?" She looked away, visibly upset. "He just wasn't good enough." It was frustrating. He would rush through it and then roll over, leaving me unsatisfied. I sought out other men who could actually bring me pleasure. I couldn't help but feel pity for her, despite everything. "I feel sorry for you, Kayla. We had a good marriage, but you chose to throw it all away for what? A fleeting night of mediocre sex?" "Don't say that," she snapped. "It wasn't just about that night. It was about how I felt abandoned." "No, Kayla," I said firmly. "You destroyed any chance we had of getting back together when you turned our children against me. I've moved on. I'm remarried to the woman I love, and I have another daughter who brings me joy. The best I can offer is to coexist at family events for the sake of our kids and grandchildren." Just as I finished my thought, the song came to an end, and I released her. I made it clear I wouldn't engage further that evening. Kayla could no longer afford the mortgage on our old house, so she eventually sold it and moved into a small apartment. With careful budgeting, she managed to get by. I heard she occasionally went on dates with friends, but as far as I knew, she never entered another serious relationship. As for Clarence, he ended up living alone, too. Meanwhile, Carly and Bobby enjoyed a long, loving marriage, welcoming 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. Josh, one of their sons, eventually married a lovely girl, and they welcomed 2 daughters into the world. Some might think I should have sought revenge on Kayla and Clarence, but the truth was I couldn't harm them without damaging myself in the process. I had moved on, found happiness, and built a life filled with love. I had a choice to make. Either allow the bitterness of my past to consume me, or move forward and embrace my life as fully as I could. They say the best revenge is a life well lived, and that's exactly what I set out to do. I decided to focus on my happiness and let karma handle the rest. Karma is an unpredictable force, and in this case, it had a striking sense of irony. Clarence and Kayla may not have faced any dire consequences directly, but they certainly didn't come away unscathed. I might not have orchestrated their downfall, but the satisfaction of knowing they weren't thriving felt like a small victory. What mattered most to me, though, was that I had my wife, my daughter, and my 2 other children back in my life. I was surrounded by love and support, a stark contrast to the chaos of my earlier years. I had built a good life, one that filled me with gratitude and joy. "Daddy," my daughter called, her eyes wide with excitement. "Are you really going to walk me down the aisle?" As any father would, my heart swelled with pride. No father wants to let his daughters go, but I felt honored to do so for her special day. "Of course, sweetheart. It's an honor I wouldn't trade for anything," I replied, my voice steady and warm. As the doors swung open, music poured into the church, enveloping us in a sense of magic and possibility. I stepped inside, leading with my left foot, a small superstition I held dear, and took a deep breath. I began to walk my daughter down the aisle, my heart racing with pride and joy. My wife stood at the front, her smile bright and encouraging, radiating love and happiness. As we approached the altar, I paused for a moment to collect my thoughts. I wanted this day to be perfect for my daughter. "Don't worry, Dad," Jenny said reassuringly, sensing my contemplation. "I'm going to make sure everything goes right this time. I talked to Carly, and we've got it all figured out." Her words brought me comfort. I knew that she was determined to make this day memorable, not just for her, but for all of us. As I led her to her place at the altar, I realized that despite the struggles we had faced, we were finally coming together as a family, stronger than ever. As we reached the front, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This was not just a wedding, it was a celebration of second chances and renewed bonds. And as I took my place beside my wife, I felt a deep sense of peace wash over me. Together, we were ready to face whatever came next, with love as our foundation. In that moment, surrounded by friends and family, I knew that we had built something beautiful, something that could withstand the trials of life. I was ready to embrace every moment, knowing that I had everything I ever wanted right by my side.